Good morning, Mr. Commissioner. Good morning, Superintendent Abrams, and good morning, my friends. My name is Bath-Sheba Van Den Berg, and I am counsel representing Freedom Corp and protesters. Thank you for your service, Superintendent, and for your forthwith testimony so far. I have a few questions for you this morning.
Certainly.
You mentioned yesterday in your testimony that the PLT use a snatch and grab method, correct?
No, they do not use that method. I believe in my testimony yesterday, I indicated that Major Critical Incident Commander Superintendent Patterson wanted to do snatch and grabs and wanted PLT assistance with that. And that actually was one of my main concerns because our PLT units are not used in that fashion ever. So actually it's the opposite of your suggestion.
So you can confirm that the method of snatch and grab was not used between February 6th and 10th of 2022 rather?
Oh no, I can't confirm that. Those operations would have been done by Ottawa Police Service if they did them. My purpose in communicating to Superintendent Patterson was if him and his service wished to do that, there would be no OPP support in doing so. They may have occurred, but if they did occur, they would have been done by the Ottawa Police Service without OPP member participation.
I want to speak with you about what snatch and grab means. You agree that it means police officers lined up in a horizontal line and in their riot gear, right?
That's not how I see it. Snatch and grab is not a policing term, to be honest, that I'm familiar with as far as a technique that we're taught or instructed on. When I heard Superintendent Patterson explain that, he didn't explain it in great detail. I pictured in my mind it was trying to locate certain individual persons who may have reasonable grounds to be arrested, and essentially when they're located, grab them off the street wherever they're located and arrest them under those authorities. That's how I viewed what snatch and grab was. I did not view it as a group activity. It was more an individual activity.
You would agree, though, that it does involve grabbing protesters, is that correct?
No, well, I mean, the individual person may be a protester themselves, but I pictured an operation where officers are going out looking for one particular person or persons on a list, but not the persons aren't together in a group. And if an opportunity arose, it would affect an arrest of that singular person.
Thank you. Was this method, to the best of your knowledge, used after the Emergencies Act was invoked?
I can't speak to that because I wasn't connected with the Ottawa Police operations at that level.
You mentioned in your testimony yesterday that you only found out about the creation of the red zone on February 17th. Is that correct?
I believe that's correct through media that was posted on Ottawa Police Twitter and some media releases that were released by Ottawa Police where they spoke about the formation of this red zone.
Is it true that you also found out on the same date of February 17th that there would be 900 officers reporting at 6 a.m. the following morning, Friday morning, February?
So yeah, yes, but if I could expand on that answer a little bit to add some context to it. So the evening, the date was February 19th or indicated?
In the evening of the February 17th, that you found out that at 6 a.m. the next morning on February 18th that there'd be 900 officers.
I believe the 17th was a Thursday, am I correct?
The 17th was a Thursday evening,
Correct.
That's correct.
So the next date was a planned large public order unit deployment, which was the first time we would have seen a large number of public order unit members on the street. And my people's role, the people I was in control of, would be to be at traffic points to help contain and control any ground that public order units were able to clear. And late that evening, I believe it was around 10 o'clock, 50 RCMP members attended our OPP command post and indicated that they were reporting to our location starting the next morning along with Ottawa Police. And that was concerning to me only because I was already deploying close to 500 to 600 of my own members. And if we added Ottawa Police and RCMP, that would be 900 members. And we would not physically be able to get that many members onto the street in time to support the operation that was planned for the next day.
So was it, in your professional opinion, that there was insufficient time to properly brief these 900 police officers prior to them being deployed on the ground?
There would not have been sufficient time to brief them and get them on the ground. So that's why that evening, as a team, I gathered my incident commander, Ottawa Police Service supervisors were on our command post helping us with telecommunications. And I gathered them in a group, and we all said we have to solve this problem because we're literally hours away from a major operation. So collaboratively and together, we all agreed on a solution so that we did not have to deal with that issue the next morning, and we were able to get officers deployed in a reasonable amount of time.
Was the name of this major Operation Takedown?
I was never aware of what the public order unit operation name was. I just knew that there was a public order operation happening the next morning, but I wasn't familiar with the name of it.
As per the Ontario Police Services Act Regulations 926, all police officers, including public order unit members performing active duty, shall have an up-to-date use of force qualification within the last 12 months. Is that correct?
I believe that applies to all serving police officers in the province of Ontario, so it would apply to public order unit members as well.
Would you be able to confirm that all officers, including those 900, received those that had that qualification before they were deployed?
I would not be able to confirm that because I don't have that information. And if I could qualify on my answer, there is a provision that allows the Solicitor General's office to provide an extension to that 12 months, whether it be due to an emergency. Best example I can give you in this case, when the public order process started, we had a large influx of OPP members come to the city of Ottawa. I had an additional almost over 400 officers come to the city. To be able to get that many members to the city, we had to do some logistical operations within our organization, and one of those was to cancel block training, which is annual training for our members on use of force and firearm requalification. So in doing so, some of those members may have gone outside the 12 months. We needed to seek approval to allow them to maybe be beyond the 12-month period, but that is allowed within the Police Service Act with proper authorities.
Was your role after the Emergencies Act was invoked ER logistics and planning liaison?
I'm sorry, after it was invoked, what was my role?
Yeah, was it logistics and planning?
No, my role was as the strategic commander. So I oversaw a team of officers that were led by an incident commander who their job was to organize the logistics of finding out where Ottawa Police needed us, because we were a support agency to the Ottawa Police. And then my incident commander and his team would provide Ottawa Police with support that they needed with frontline officers. The public order unit command and what they needed for public order unit was separate from myself, and I didn't have direction or control over our public unit members.
And you were reporting to Chief Superintendent Carson Party, is that correct?
Yes.
You considered him your commander?
I did.
Were you involved in the planning phase for the operation, the major operation?
Only for, I believe I said yesterday, only for about 48 hours, just in the initial stages when the integrated planning team got started, and we had our initial meetings on the 8th and the 9th. And that was the only time I had direct contact with the members of that planning team, and I reverted back to my role of managing our OPP members and our deployments in support of the Ottawa Police.
With regards to the boots on the ground, were PLT supporting POUs?
I was not aware of what PLT was doing. I know PLT eventually had a seat in the NCRCC with our critical incident commander. So there was always, I believe it was a PLT sergeant that sat beside our critical incident commander. But I'm not aware exactly of what they were doing in the field, because that would not have been reported to me.
And yesterday you mentioned that OPP and OPS PLTs had an integration problem and communications issues. Is that right?
That's what was reported to me, correct.
And also with the POUs?
I can't say that I heard of a lack of integration within our public order units. That wasn't reported to me.
Do you agree with me that after the invocation of the Emergencies Act, that these integration problems and communications problems continued and did not improve?
Within the PLT teams, there were still issues. I would have calls with Inspector Baudin, and he would say some days they were making forward progress, and other days they still lacked an ability to understand what the plan was, because until the integrated planning team came up with a plan, there was still no plan. So they still struggled to determine what their purpose was. Were they truly an integrated team between the Ottawa Police Service PLT team and the OPP PLT team? There were still those issues, yes.
Okay. And that, in fact, that the problems worsened after the influx of 900 additional officers on the ground on Friday morning, the 18th of February.
I don't know if they any worsened. I think they maintained and they were similar, but I don't know that they became any worse.
Would you agree with me that due to the lack of integration and communication problems, that would lead to a problem ultimately in decision-making throughout the major operations?
Certainly. The information that PLT is able to provide and tell us about conversations they're having with convoy organizers and exit plans, or what the intent of the organizers are, is very important in forming operational plans of how we're going to approach a protest. So being unable to get that information has an impact, yes, in a negative way.
And when I mentioned major operation, I mean after the invocation of the Emergencies Act.
So, though I consider it one giant operation, and the lack of communication had impacts all along, from invocation period prior to and during.
If it didn't improve after the invocation of the Emergencies Act, would you agree that it got worse?
I can't say it got worse. It just seemed to be a similar theme throughout my time as strategic commander, as I continue to hear the lack of communication, the lack of integration. That was a common theme. It didn't seem to increase through one day or the other, whether again prior to February 14th or after. It seemed to be a similar theme throughout.
And the final phase after this major operation, after the invocation of the Emergencies Act, was called the maintenance phase. Is that correct?
I recall that name being used. It was a phrase meant to maintain and hold ground that public order unit members were able to clear streets, intersections, those types of things.
Do you agree that every officer who draws their firearm in the presence of public and uses weapons or improvised weapon other than a firearm on another person, or uses physical force on a person that results in an injury to that person requiring medical attention, shall complete a use of force report prior to the end of duty?
I can only speak to the OPP. There is a use of force reporting requirement. I apologize. I'm not certain on the timelines of when it shall be done, whether it's at the end of their shift or within a certain number of days. I'd have to review the legislation. So unfortunately, I can't give you the exact answer on that. But I tried to follow all what you were speaking about, but from whatever heard you say, it seems to check all the boxes that are related to our members when they have to fill out use of force reports. And all the occasions you mentioned, from what I recall hearing, fit those needs to have a use of force report submitted.
Timelines aside, were any of those use of force reports completed after the major operations, after the invocation of the Emergencies Act?
I'm not aware.
Yesterday, you mentioned that you listened and you watched Superintendent Morris's testimony yesterday. Is that correct? You mentioned that yesterday in your testimony.
I'd seen parts of his testimony, yes.
And do you agree with it?
I don't disagree with many of the things that Superintendent Morris said. It was his testimony, and it was consistent with our organizational values and his public provincial intelligence bureau mandates.
Thank you. Those are all my questions, and thank you again for your service.
Thank you.
Thank you.